Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk about Ukraine, and the question is whether or not Ukraine is Syria 2.0. So what do I mean by that? Now this is going to seem surprising when I say this, but the United States will not allow Syria to become a democracy. So the United States has given military aid to Syria, but it's a carrot on a stick. The United States will never give Syria so much military aid that it actually becomes a democracy, that the freedom fighters actually win. Now, why is that? Well, if Syria becomes a democracy, then right away Syria is going to want a constitution, freedom of the press, and the people are going to want to elect their own president. Now, the United States is supposed to support all those things as as the light of freedom, and it generally does. But the problem is there's a fork in the road here. It can either support Israel or support democracy, and so unfortunately, the United States chooses Israel. So the problem faced is that if Syria becomes a democracy, then Israel will stand out as a sore thumb, because Israel does not have any of those things. It does not have a constitution. Now, a lot of people wonder, what kind of modern free country doesn't have freedom of the press? Well, Israel isn't modern, and it has limited freedom. For example, if you get off of the plane in Israel, not with an ordinary tourist camera, but with, a news camera, there are actually officials there at the Israeli airports who will come up to you, and they're more than happy to explain that there's no freedom of the press in Israel, and they give you like a little card that explains there's no freedom of the press in Israel, you've been warned. Then with the so-called president of Israel, the president is a president in name only, because instead of being elected by the people of Israel, the president is elected by the Israeli parliament. So the problem that the United States has is that the only way you can keep Israel from standing out like a sore thumb is if you beat down the entire surrounding region. And that's what the United States has done, whether it's Lebanon or Syria and so forth. The United States keeps the rest of the surrounding area beaten down so that Israel doesn't stand out like a sore thumb by contrast. So that's the Syrian predicament. So the Syrian predicament summed up is that the United States will not allow Syria to become a democracy, because if it does, then Israel will stand out like a sore thumb by contrast with its neighbor. Well, the question is whether or not the United States is doing the same sort of thing in Ukraine, because you notice that the United States has been giving Ukraine military aid, but it's been giving military aid to Syria as well, but never enough to actually win the conflict. So that's the worst case scenario. You're given enough to keep the fight going, but But yeah, so you know, it's questionable. Is there a reason? I don't know exactly what the reason would be off the top of my head right now, but it's questionable that the United States is really trying to help the Ukrainians defeat the Russians. You know, they're obviously giving the Ukrainians, you know, enough help to keep the Russians busy. But you know, if you're not going to give them the, you know, the real weapons that they need, like the fighter jets and things like that, you know, you can always make an excuse. Oh, well, we can't do that. You know, like Biden says, don't kid a kidder and stuff like that. You know, you can always do that. But the question is there a political reason why the United States does not actually want the Ukraine to win? Because if that's the case, then wow. If that's the case, we're going to see, you know, a protracted conflict here like we have in Syria. So it's something to think about.